Well, this week I want to announce a new initiative. I have the Friday blog post where for now I'm doing Debussy. Once I've gone a bit further, I might do other composers. I could do more Rachmaninoff. I could finally do the Chopin series that I wanted to do with the Mazurkas. So what I'd really like, we've had so much success with our Wednesday Zoom concert series that I'd like to have a participatory event. And so I'm thinking Mondays at 7 p.m. Central Time, we can have a weekly discussion. I'll give sort of a brief introduction, and then we can have teachers, we could have students, we can have music aficionados, discussing various topics. And, feel free to, in the blog or on Facebook or, personally, let me know what topics might be of interest to you. I'm thinking next week, let's talk about how do we learn a piece of music? How do we approach it? I've taught many beginners over the years, over the last more than 25 years. And of course, if you start with, I'm a big fan of the Bastian piano series. Of course, I've used the Alfred, I've used the Faber and Faber, the music tree. There are many series you can use. But if you're going to play the piano, fundamentally, you want to learn how to read the music, right? How to read the notes. And my goal is to teach students to be independent. When we're at the very basic stages, here's Old MacDonald. You can see we show the diagram on the keys, and it's fingers, because we need to know what finger goes where, right? For instance, with Old MacDonald, we have this position divided between the hands. I need to know, the stems go down, so it's the left hand. The stems go up, it's the right hand for the purposes of this. You see, we've got the finger numbers, and so the students are reading finger numbers. I would like to say 3 down to 2, down to 1, so that we put a direction, up being to the right, down being to the left. Of course, this is very basic, but we have to start somewhere, right? And in fact, I've started an 8-year-old a couple of weeks ago, and we're working with these pieces, and this is what you have to do. Well, of course, then we get into the staff and the clefs, right? And now it's relational reading, right? We've got, if you're on a line note, you go up a skip. Or down a skip. If it's a space note, it's a skip. If you go line to space or space to line, it's a step. And then all the intervals later come from that. But, and of course we've got treble clef and bass clef. But then the idea is we're seeing relationships. Reading, learning is all about relationships. If I'm looking, hunting hounds. 3 or 4 times. We've gone far enough in this book that it's about fifths. You see it says fifth over here. And, they're introducing that. And so, at the very basic levels, this is what we're doing. We're trying to get the notion, oh, okay, I see the pattern. Here maybe I have thirds, maybe I have steps. Now I play with the left hand. And, there are various sight reading books. At the beginning stages, this is the Bastian A Line a Day. Not a bad book. I'm a big fan of the Bastian sight reading series, and that's a wonderful one. But this isn't bad. And here we go up by steps, then down by steps, then we go over to the left hand. So it's something like. It's not complete, but you see we've got this overall arch contour going up. Then we go down to the left. We go up. And then I ended on that note over here, which happens to be a D. If I were reading it, this is very basic. I would look at it and think, okay, I go up a step from C through D to E, down a skip to the C, step down B, A, G, it's a half note, so I hold. Step down to the F, then I go up the scale through the B, and then I skip up to the D. Just to show you that. And that sounds like this. And I've scanned it. My idea with the sight reading is that I would go all the way through it without stopping. I'd try to get it right. I wouldn't correct myself. Now we're talking about something that's very sight readable for someone who has a basic understanding of the piano. What do we do when we get to something harder, something that we don't know how to approach, something maybe we can't sight read. This is actually one of my, I'm a big fan of Ligeti. Most of his pieces are terribly difficult. But this is a tempo de valse, you can see. Looks a little like Chopin, doesn't it? It looks like something fairly traditional and straightforward, except it's, oh, sorry about that. Well, it's different, right? I can use all my understanding of intervals, of chords, of relationships, and I'm not going to have this expectation of how it's supposed to sound, right? And that's what reading and learning, we have to be able to translate these symbols. Now, of course, the musical language, you know, we hear things. What piece could that be that's very famous? If I did more of it, well, most of us would know that's Beethoven's Für Elise, right? You know, there's certain things that it's like, oh, we plug in, and then all these associations and all of these relationships suddenly make sense. And of course, our music system, the tonal music system, is predicated on that. We're supposed to do that. We're supposed to say, oh yeah, well, and this is a scale if I'm in the Waldstamm. Sorry. You know, that's an E minor. Here we got the dominant, we got the chord, the B major, and then it's the dominant seventh. If I know these things, I can plug them in. You know, if that's at the end of the Chopin. Sorry, that's the end of the Mozart C minor Fantasy. If you've practiced your scales, well, you plug it in. Oh, that's a scale. I can figure that out. But we can't always do that. You know, and some things we can't. So, you know, I have, you know, ideas of how I want to approach things. And for me, you know, I've studied style that when I'm teaching, I want to talk about it. I mean, I'm going to approach a Chopin Mazurka differently than I would this, what looks like a simple sort of waltz or Mazurka by Ligeti. You know, I would approach that very differently. I would approach a Mozart sonata differently. You know, there's a certain harmonic language, there's a certain melodic language, there's a repeat of phrases, there's certain style, you know, certain things, melodic fragments that are going to happen, you know, that you're not going to get. This is another wonderful book, by the way, that I've had a lot of great luck with. It's by Schott. And they're smaller pieces that we just don't know. Like, for instance, here in the cave. I mean, look at that. There's no bar line at the beginning, right? Is it like chant? Is it free? You know, this is something you have to work out, you know, with your teacher. Or if you don't have a teacher, you're like, well, how do I make the choices? I mean, last week I discussed Friolina, the Hervé Perret piece that doesn't have bar lines. And Brad Emerson, you know, pointed out, well, it's like chant. And it is. You know, Hervé Perret did so much with vocal music that, of course, he was very, very aware of chant. Is, because he's still living, born in 1935. And so I thought that was, you know, it's a great observation. It'd be nice to have people in the communication and the discussion who will bring these points up, because, I mean, I didn't mention that, but that's a very salient feature of this, you know. And again, you know, how do you approach this? You know, you've got this pedal thing that you hold throughout, and then there's different lengths of the measures, and you know, I talked last time about how the phrases, you know, each measure is really its own phrase, its own sentence in effect. But I'd love to hear, you know, what are your techniques? Or, you know, maybe you have a specific question about how to learn something, you know, or maybe there's a piece, or maybe there's a composer. And as we go on, I want to explore, you know, we might do one on sight reading. You know, I've taught sight reading quite a bit. And how do we teach it? How do we do it? How do we discipline ourselves to do it? You know, how do we memorize? How do we make sure that it stays memorized? You know, how do I do a waltzing in the bass? How do I work on scales so that I have good technique and dynamic control? I mean, these are all things that are, you know, bread and butter for what we do. Now I've played a lot of hymns in church for 15 years, and including when I was at Round Rock Presbyterian, I would sight read at 8:25 in the morning after driving half an hour to get there. Bleary-eyed. It looks sort of like a song or a hymn, doesn't it? Or chorale. So you might think, oh, okay, well that's not that hard. It's gonna have a typical, predictable sound, right? Well, it's not so strange, but it's not necessarily what we expected looking on the page, right? So we really have to free ourselves so that we can read the chords and the intervals and make that happen. You know, that's a process. So I invite you to join us next week, 7 o'clock Central Time. I'll be providing a Zoom link, and we will have a discussion about how to learn a piece, how to approach a piece. I look forward to it. Thanks.